Good afternoon. This is Brian Sukup, the Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the American Society of Interior Designers. Welcome to ASID's bi-monthly public policy webinar series presented by the ASID Government and Public Affairs Department. ASID believes that to be good advocates for interior design, we must be informed on all public policy issues that affect or are affected by interior designers and the industry. That's why every month, ASID is committed to bringing you public policy content relevant to the industry and profession. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 credit of continuing education through IDCEC. This afternoon, we present Interior Designers, Leading the Way in Health, Safety, and Welfare Through Codes and Standards. The presentation will be guest hosted by the ASID National Codes and Standards Chair, Tracy Fillmore. As Chair of the ASID National Codes and Standards Committee, Tracy Fillmore, NCIDQ, ASID, CAPS, Green AP, Florida RID, leads a team of highly skilled interior designers to advocate for the interior design profession on many fronts. With great enthusiasm, Tracy leads the committee tasked with the profession's representation in codes and standards development, forums including ICC, NFPA, BIFMA, USGBC, etc., submissions of proposals and recommendations to state, federal, and government agencies, evaluation of ASID professional ethics standards, and review and expert input on design education. In this role, Tracy is also ASID's member representative to a variety of national and international codes, standards, education, and professional ethics entities. Prior to becoming an ASID professional interior designer, Tracy was a fire safety inspector in her home state of Florida. That experience in the code enforcement field has provided Tracy with great opportunities to utilize her codes knowledge and skills to design in many different types of building and occupancy types. All lines are currently muted, but if you have questions, please use the question box function during the presentation, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the program. Without further delay, ASID would like to welcome Tracy Fillmore. Tracy?
Thank you, Brian. Well, I'm excited to share with you some great information, not only just about our Codes and Standards Committee, but ways that interior designers can affect health, safety, and welfare. Learning objectives that we're going to cover today are: we will examine the role of interior designers in safeguarding the health, safety, and welfare of the public. We will also consider the interior design profession's role in the process of codes and standards development. We will gain practical and important guidelines on how we can impact life, health, safety in the designed environment. And we will also learn how to apply our knowledge of codes and standards to advocate for the users and for our profession. Then we will also get an update on what ASID is doing to help further codes and standards and to garner more respect for interior designers and the interior design profession. So what is ASID's role in health, safety, and welfare? As one of the guardians of health, safety, and welfare in the built environment, ASID supports the development and adoption of modern building codes, design standards, public policies, laws, and regulations that support safe, sustainable, inclusive, healthy, and efficient design and construction and the wellness of building occupants. This is a tall order. We will dig down on many of these areas as we talk today, and we will talk about building codes and standards and their effect on the built environment as well as on the occupants. In 2018, October, ASID developed the National Codes and Standards Committee. Our goal was to engage, and at that point it was called Construction Codes and Standards. Our goal was to engage with code development entities and work towards bringing interior design industry to the table, and then making sure that we, interior designers, have a long-standing seat at that table. Codes and Standards Committee, as we are now called, has made huge strides, and now we have seats at tables of many of the code development organizations. We'll speak in detail about some of them as we go through today's presentation. This is a list of some that you can see on here, but there are many others that we are engaging with. Our committee mission, right now we have 14 members on our committee. We are expected to be around 20 members, and then we are planning to add hopefully 6 student members to our committee because we really want to help students and emerging professionals to become excited about codes and standards. So our mission statement is that our American Society of Interior Designers National Codes and Standards Committee advocates and educates regarding the effects of the constructed environment on life, health, safety, and welfare of all members of the general public. Now, just to highlight that, we advocate and educate regarding the effects of the constructed environment on life, health, safety, and welfare for all members of the general public. It's a tall order, but we're up for the mission. Currently, we have members represented in 12 states, but as I said, we will be adding more members. We put out a call recently and got some wonderful applications in, and we're reviewing those applications right now. So our committee will be represented in many more states soon to follow. So let's talk here about health, safety, and welfare. As interior designers, we want to talk about how do we impact them. It's important to refresh our memories on how do we impact health, safety, and welfare. Practitioners are focused on these roles regarding health, and you can see there's anthropometrics, which is a really hard word to say, but it has to do with human, body size, shape, and our knowledge of that. Obviously, if you're designing an area for children, you're going to make sure that the furniture is appropriately sized for the children that you're designing that space for. Ergonomics. We're constantly talking about the efficiency of the human and how we're working within our spaces. Acoustics, sound transfer, mitigation. I mean, you can see the list, and this is just a very, very short list of areas that are directly impacted by health. And then safety. Similarly, practitioners are focused on some of the areas regarding safety in the constructed environment. We're trained and knowledgeable in calculating interior occupant codes. Many of us are knowledgeable about and actually even experts in emergency lighting locations, fire safety device locations. We're all working constantly within materials and furnishings, and if you're working in commercial spaces, you need to be knowledgeable about the flammability and flame and smoke spread ratings. So, and of course, in all areas, whether it's residential or commercial, you're focusing on universal design. And then welfare. When it comes to welfare of the general public in our constructed spaces, practitioners focus on these areas regarding welfare in the built environment. We must continually refresh our memories on the bigger picture of why we do what we do. And as you can see here, when it comes to welfare, it's focusing on the bigger picture. We're looking at function, we're looking at cultural relevance, the accessibility, universal standards, and inclusivity in our designs. So as we work in public spaces, we want to talk about the role overall in health, safety, and welfare. So we have it broken down into these 8 areas. And so we're going to look in depth at each one of these. The first one is advancement. How do interior designers advance health, safety, and welfare? Let's focus on the constructed environment, certifications, and the profession. We have been educated and tested on the importance of safety, accessibility, sustainability, and well-being. There has been a big push lately to focus our attention on buildings that will be around for a long time after we're gone, and for those buildings to be safe for all inhabitants. We can do this by appropriately selecting materials and products that are responsibly specified. On certifications, we will talk more about this later, but I want to take this moment to sound the drum for credentialing that sets us apart. Too often our industry has been watered down, and we have the resources to rise above the tide and to show allied professionals, colleagues, and users that we are cut above. We'll talk about the NCIDQ exam later on in this presentation, but I bring it up here to say that if we do not work on raising the bar on certification, we will never achieve the respect of other professionals that we work with in the field, and we rightly deserve that respect. We can advance our profession through research, continuously staying abreast of the changes and developments in our industry and regarding the built environment. And also on certifications, I mean, you know, I've talked about the NCIDQ, but what about LEED certification, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design? What about a WELL certification? What about CAT, Certified Aging in Place? What about the AAHID, which is the American Academy of Healthcare Interior Designers? You know, these are certifications that can be added to your portfolio once you've gotten your past your NCIDQ, and you don't have to have the NCIDQ to get these. But I think it's important that we're constantly advancing ourselves so that we can advance our profession. On this slide, what I'd like to do is ask Brian to come back in and talk to us a little bit because he's very knowledgeable. Brian never toots his own horn, but I will. He's Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the American Society of Interior Designers, and Brian has traveled all over the country working to help to make sure that we have our practice rights where they need to be, that we are protecting our rights, and we are advancing our rights. So, Brian, can you share with us a little bit about this slide?
Sure, Tracy. Thank you very much, and good afternoon again, everybody. You know, one of the reasons we thought it was important to bring back a Construction Codes and Standards Committee is because it's so important that interior designers be represented when these design and construction standards and ethical standards are being created. One of the things we hear in the state capitals as we go across the country trying to bring government oversight and recognition to interior design on a voluntary basis is that other design professionals, codes and standards organizations, they don't hear enough from interior designers, so they don't understand what it is we do. So part of the charge of the Codes and Standards Committee is to make sure we're represented. And by making sure we're represented at those tables, hopefully the conversations with other design professionals, the Codes and Standards community, building inspectors, plans reviewers, permit technicians, and so forth will be more open and honest and supportive in the future. Of course, part of that is our discussions on practice rights and the ability for interior designers to practice within the scope of interior design practice more independently and more fully. As many of you know, I've worked with many of you on this call. You know, we are working across the state. ASID has a mandate that we'd like to see recognition of interior design and practice rights for interior designers in all 50 U.S. states. We're making our way there. We have currently 27 U.S. states that in some form or fashion recognize and have some sort of government oversight, voluntary nature over the interior design profession. And that enables interior designers to have greater practice and business rights. We also have 2 federal jurisdictions in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico that also recognize interior design. And of course, our hope is to expand that across the country. As you can see on the slide, unfortunately, because interior design is a more recent or newer profession, we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to our government recognition and regulation. We do live in a federal nation where the states are able to set standards for different professions. So because interior design really has only started becoming regulated in the last 40 to 50 years, every state has done so pretty differently. I don't think there's a single 2 states that have the same definition of scope of practice for interior designers, and there's no 2 states that designers and folks in the construction industry to understand what the different rights and what the different roles and responsibilities of interior designers per state law. The 2 major types that we see across the country are Title Acts. Of course, many of you are familiar with Title Acts. Title Acts define who can call themselves or hold themselves as to be a registered, certified, or licensed interior designer. Many of you know that between 2009 and 2011, a federal court case worked its way across Florida and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which said that because interior design is such a broad term and is such a colloquially known term, that the term interior design on its own cannot be regulated. But the court also said that because interior design does impact or practice areas in interior design do impact that public health, safety, welfare, that creating licenses, registrations, certifications through the state is permissible. The other part of that is, of course, controlling who calls themselves a registered, certified, or licensed interior designer. So in several states, we do have Title Acts that restrict that term, those terms. We do have certain states that do have practice acts. Practice acts are more expansive than Title Acts. They do require continuing education. There are reporting requirements. There are practice and business rights that are associated with those acts. So they're more expansive in that. Many of those states, about a dozen now, grant interior designers their own construction document stamp to do permitted work, separate from an architect or engineer. And again, there are other requirements and responsibilities that interior designers have, varying by state. But of course, again, because of Locke versus Shore, that 11th Circuit Court of Appeals case, no Interior Design Act, no Interior Design Practice Act can be strictly restricted. As you know, for doctors and lawyers, you can't call yourself a lawyer unless you pass the bar exam and you've joined the bar and done these other things. They can be restrictive. They are mandatory practice acts. Because of Locke versus Shore, no practice act can be completely mandatory and restrictive. And that's all right. We want to give those rights to interior designers who want to have government oversight. And for those people working under architects, engineers, registered interior designers, or working in perhaps the decorative space or the non-regulated space, we understand that government recognition and oversight is not necessary. So that's just a snapshot. And again, Tracy's work and the work of this committee is furthering the professionalism and furthering the voice of the profession in codes and standards. And we know that that will help us in other conversations and discussions in the regulated environment. So Tracy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Brian. He does that so much better than me, so I like to let him do that. You can see, I just wanted to mention that you can see some of the states are gray, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong in the states that are gray where they've got no legislation on the books. As Brian said, there's a big push for these states for that to happen. I know for a fact that there are a few that we spoke to some people when we were at the International Code Council meeting, where they're pushing in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Hawaii. So I know that those things are happening, and many of these states are not densely populated states. So I just wanted to mention that because, the states that you see that have the heaviest regulations are typically your densely populated states. But we need to grow through advocacy. We need to advocate for our profession. And, as Brian shared about, what's happening in some of the states, I can tell you that just as we're trying to advance those states that don't have practice acts or title acts, we're also trying to defend the profession constantly, unfortunately, in some states. In fact, my home state of Florida, there's legislation right now where they're attempting to take away some of our rights to practice. And so there is effort that is being made to advocate to try to make sure that we can keep these rights. They did the same thing last year, and so we kind of feel a bit vulnerable. But the way I see it is that if we're not advocating for our profession, then it would be foolish for us to think that somebody else is going to be advocating for the profession for us. So we need to be working towards trying to make sure that we know what's going on. We need to know what legislation is in place in the states where we practice or where we live. We need to be aware if there are any challenges to our practice rights or potential advancement of those rights, where you can get on board and help to be a part of the advancement of that. And it's not just about being aware of what's going on, but it's really about getting involved in it. So, I think about the ASID motto that is advocate by design. It isn't, as far as I see it, it's not really a slogan line. I see it as a call to action. So we talked about engagement, we're on advancement. So as we're looking back at advancement, okay, the call to action for us here is to continuously develop health, safety, and welfare expertise. That's our call to action. And our takeaway quote here is, progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be. And I think that says it very well. So we talked about advancement. Now let's talk about engagement. How, where, and with whom do interior designers engage? Practitioners should engage on many levels when working within the profession. We can engage with the public through outreach. We can outreach to code officials, agencies and organizations, and you see some listed there: the International Code Council, National Fire Protection Association, the U.S. Access Board, Underwriters Laboratories, the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association. And then we can outreach to interior design organizations: American Society of Interior Designers, International Interior Design Association, National Kitchen and Bath Association, CEDA, the Council for Interior Design Accreditation. And we'll talk about some of these further along in the presentation. CIDQ, which is the Council for Interior Design Qualifications, and the Interior Design Society. And then we can engage with allied professionals: American Institute of Architecture, International Interior Design Association. What about NCARB? So that's the National Council for Architectural Registration Boards, and IWBI, which is the International Well Building Institute. And then, of course, we can outreach to legislatures on the local, state, and federal levels. We need to get involved with local, state, and national chapters of organizations that we might be a part of, or local enforcement agencies. We need to get to know who the code officials are in our area. Just as we discussed in advancement, it's imperative to know what's happening at the local, state, and federal levels of the agencies that impact our profession. So our call to action here is get engaged at the local, state, and national levels. And our takeaway thought here is the best way to sell something is don't sell anything. Earn the awareness, respect, and trust of those who might buy. And even though this has to do with sales, as far as I see it, it has a lot to do with how we're representing ourselves to others about our industry. So now let's talk about representation. Where and how do interior designers represent? We represent every other interior designer when we are working with our clientele. As we advance our knowledge and engage with clientele, we show our expertise in ways that no other profession can. While not everyone is a joiner, it is important to join your local chapter, attend chapter meetings and events so that you are on the cutting edge of what's going on in the industry. We also represent the industry when working with code officials. It's crucial to show code officials and allied professionals that we know our stuff. Interior designers need to join organizations where codes are developed and ratified and have a voice with what codes are being enacted. This is as much for the interior design industry as it is for the general public. No other professional is trained in the areas that interior design professionals are trained. Our perspective is a critical one. So join interior design organizations. Once again, your voice is important. If you want to have a seat at the table, join professional organizations and be active with them. It's crucial to your involvement. It's important for legislators to know that the buildings that they are working in and those of their constituents are actually safer because trained, tested interior design professionals are a part of the construction and the design process. Our call to action about representation is use every occasion to share your unique knowledge and expertise. And our takeaway thought here is knowledge is like money. To be of value, it must circulate. And in circulating, it can increase in quantity and hopefully in value. So we advance we engage, and we represent our industry. But the foundation of all of these is professional responsibility. The importance of ethics and professional responsibility. So let's talk about ethical behavior and professional responsibility here. Recognized professionals are held to a higher standard. Because of our role in the life, safety, and welfare of the public, it's incumbent upon us to carry that same moral code through all of our interactions. We have a responsibility to many parties. We have a responsibility to be knowledgeable about our profession, to carry out our role as an ethical practitioner, and to advocate for the health, safety, and welfare of every user of every space that we put our names on. Since none of us operate in a vacuum, it's important to be aware of what is going on around you. It's no longer acceptable or advisable to practice without knowing more today than you did a year or 10 years ago. That's why it's a good practice to join organizations that share your values. Join ASID and other organizations that will work alongside of you to advance your profession. But we're not just talking about being knowledgeable and practicing, but we're talking about ethical behavior as well. It may seem like a no-brainer that we should be ethical, but are we really? We have to strive to adhere to the laws, regulations, and standards in every environment that we operate in. We should work to not only meet, but to exceed the minimum standards that are set in the code books. We should prove our credibility by our actions, because it permeates our profession, our professional and our personal lives. And whether we like it or not, the two do intersect. Every organization, including ASID, has some sort of code of ethics and professional conduct or standard of care. We should have our own strong moral code of conduct in our personal and professional lives. Remember, there are many eyes that are watching. So our call to action here would be to know what you're responsible for and abide by the rule of law. And our takeaway thought is, in business, professionalism is not a tactic, but it's a moral value. So let's go to the other side of our graphic here. Let's talk about development and adoption. And because these two are so closely related, we decided to actually talk about them together because they really do go hand in hand. How do interior designers get involved in development and adoption of codes and standards? First of all, it's important to understand the impact of codes and standards. It's important to know what the local and national standards, and if you're working in an international space, what are the international codes that you're dealing with? Do you know the codes? Do you care about the codes? And do you focus on the codes? Or do you just let others worry about that? While I don't believe codes and standards are really taught enough in our schools, there is not a project that you work on in this country that codes and standards don't apply in some way. Let me repeat that. There is not a project that you work on in this country that some sort of codes and standards do not in some way apply. We must not only know the codes, but we must know how to apply them. We must meet the requirements that are set before us. But as I have long said back when I was a fire inspector, it's not about meeting minimum codes, but we should try to exceed them. It's never about the minimum. It should be always more than that. If you know codes and standards, if you don't know about codes and standards, ask someone to help you with it. Understand the intent and the spirit of the code requirements. People often resist wanting to meet certain codes. I remember looking at fire extinguishers hanging on the walls in certain, when I was working in a luxury clubhouse, I remember looking around and seeing the fire extinguishers and thinking, I'm a designer. How can I disguise that and make it blend in with the beautiful decor that I had created? That big red ugly thing hanging on the wall just didn't thrill me. But knowing the intent of the code and the lives that would be saved simply because the users of the space were not able to find the extinguisher, I could let my designer thoughts go on that. And everyone can play a role in the process of code and standards development. So join the profession in having a seat at the table. We've made huge strides in our engagement with the International Code Council, with National Fire Protection Association, the National Access Board. And just to share a little bit, and of course with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and just to share a little bit of information here. So there were several of us that went to the International Code Council meeting, which, if you don't know, that is where the codes are actually developed and discussed and adopt. And we'll talk about that a little bit further down in the presentation here. But we went and we had an opportunity to share with code officials, and they were from all around the country. We had an opportunity to share with them what interior designers do and what our level of knowledge is. And it was shocking to me to see that many of them had no idea what interior designers were capable of and the knowledge level that we have. We have a joke on the Codes and Standards Committee that we're not just a bunch of pillow fluffers and paint pickers, and that's what people tend to think that we do, but we do so much more. And then the National Fire Protection Association, we have two interior designers that are both actually fellows that have been sitting on technical committees for the National Fire Protection Association for about 20 years. And we have two more designers that are joining forces with them on the technical committees too. So once again, it's not just about the National Fire Protection Association and just being a member, but it's about actually sitting on technical committees and helping to make sure that the fire codes that are written make sense and that interior designers have a voice at that table. With regard to the National Access Board, one of the ladies on our National Codes and Standards Committee is a member of the National Code Access Board, and she was appointed by the President of the United States several years ago to be on that board. So if that isn't a seat at the table, I don't know what is. So this is a graphic that shows a little bit about the process of development and adoption of codes and standards, and with the International Code Council and National Fire Protection Association. So Brian used to work for the International Code Council, and so I've asked him to come back in and to share the process of the International Code Council adoption of codes.
Thank you, Tracy. And just to be clear, these are NFPA and ICC, of course, are just two of the many codes and standards organizations that we're working with, in addition to BIFMA, APMO, USGBC. There are several out there, but of course, we can't focus on all the different processes today, so we'll focus just on ICC and NFPA. But as Tracy mentioned, I did used to work for ICC. I worked there for 4 years in their government affairs department, so I was very familiar with the code adoption process and how everything works. Code adoption and development is very, very complex. And one of the great things, certainly about ICC, the organization I'm most familiar with, is that there are a lot of checks and balances along the way. Codes and standards aren't about economic benefit. They're not about who has the most money or who's the most politically connected. It's about doing what's best for the public health, safety, and welfare. So you can see in this document, there's a lot of input and a lot of checks and balances. The first step, of course, is receiving public comments from or code change proposals from the public. Anybody, whether you are an architect, engineer, interior designer, or a code official, or just somebody who's really interested in changing the way his or her home or business is constructed, can submit a code change proposal. It's really important for everybody to know. Anybody on this call can submit a code change proposal. We, of course, would recommend you work through, if you're an interior designer, through our National Codes and Standards Committee, but anybody can submit a code change proposal. From there, all the code changes are, as long as they're in the correct administrative, logistical format, are then published as part of an agenda. Those go to the committee action hearings and the committees. Those committees are experts of architects, interior designers, engineers, building owners, and so forth that review the code change proposals, and then will actually make a recommendation based on those code change proposals. Accept it, don't accept it, or amend it. That is then put to an online vote and an in-person vote. Those results are then published. Then it goes to a whole separate process or a whole separate group to testify, to hold a hearing, and then to vote. That's called the public comment period. Public comments are received on what the committees do. They're reviewed. The public comment agenda is published. People come out to the ICC annual conference and the code hearings to actually then make comments on those hearings. Anybody can testify. Again, it is open to anybody, not just ICC members, not just people who pay money. Anybody can come to the ICC meetings. We were there. ASID were there in Las Vegas this past October. Anybody can come and testify. People come and comment on the proposed changes. And then it goes to a vote of the building code officials. What's great about ICC's process is that the final vote is left to the code officials. It's not left to the manufacturers. It's not left to anybody else. It is left to the folks with the responsibility to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And based on the in-person and online vote of the code officials, that's what creates the new version of the code. Of course, that is just a model that is created. States and counties and municipalities and localities then have to adopt what is created. But again, it's a really great process. A lot of different opportunities for ASID and for interior designers to get involved. And then, of course, it is finalized by the building code officials, the folks with the responsibility to protect the public. Tracy, I'll turn it back over to you for an SPA.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So, as I've shared, I used to be a fire inspector, and so I used to enforce the fire codes and knew a whole lot about NFPA codes. I can tell you that I am not knowledgeable about the process of how the codes are adopted. So you can see the graphic here. I mean, it shows a 4-step process of public input, public comment stage. It shows the technical meeting stage, and then the council appears and they adopt the standards. I can tell you that I'm not knowledgeable about that, but that's the beauty of a committee like we have, where we have an expert that is on this committee that is knowledgeable about it and has been a part of the National Fire Protection Association for a long time. So it's very helpful to have several people that are involved in different areas of codes and standard development. So, as we shared, there are a lot of things involved in the development and adoption. And I can just say that many hands make a light load. There's a lot that needs to be done. We have subcommittees on our Codes and Standards Committee that one is designated just for the International Code Council. One is just for the National Fire Protection Association. And we do that because there are many others, and we have several subcommittees. But the bottom line is anybody that is interested in helping to find out more about the development and adoption of codes can reach out to our Codes and Standards Committee, and we'll share that in the presentation a little bit further along. So our call to action here is to lend your expertise to the development process. And our takeaway is all growth depends on activity, and there is no development physically or intellectually without effort, and that means work. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So we'd love anybody's help that wants to come alongside and help us. So now let's talk about research. We've done the heavy lifting when it comes to the development and adoption of codes. So as interior designers, we should be informing our design decisions through research. So interior designers are consumers of research as well as we generate research. We can point the arrow back at research when we're making design decisions, and if we're ever questioned by allied professionals. We should make every effort to participate in research. We should be providing post-occupancy inspections and interviews so that we're making sure that the areas that we're designing are working as we've designed them to be. And you can access research through many ways. I can tell you that ASID and other organizations offer research to the profession. ASID has a page that is dedicated to research, and there are many other materials out there for the interior design profession. We generate research in many different ways, and the way we have discussed it in our committee is that this research can define and give value to interior designers, and we should be contributors to that. Our takeaway here, our call to action, is the interior design profession's body of knowledge is something that we can all use and add to. And I'll show the resources at the end that can show you how to access the interior design profession's body of knowledge. Our takeaway is research is to see what everybody else has seen and then to think what nobody else has thought. And the last area on this graphic that we're going to talk about is education. Commit to training, continuous learning, and measures of competence. And we've touched on this a few times throughout the presentation, but as interior designers, we should seek to grow our knowledge base through continuing education. Know that you can keep track of your CEUs through IDCEC, which is the International Design or Continuing Education Council. Look for webinars and trainings such as this webinar, which is through ASID, the Government Public Affairs webinars. There's the ASID Academy. Industry partners are always happy to offer continuing education opportunities for us, lunch and learns. And then there are other organizations such as LEAD, WELL, and CAPS that offer CEUs, and those CEUs can cross over to ASID, and some of the other CEUs that you take, whether it's through ASID or IDA or wherever, will cross over into those organizations as well. We're never too old to learn. None of us have arrived yet, and none of us are at the level in our career where we don't need to learn something. Our industry is ever changing, so we need to be ever changing as well. Our call to action here is to meet the bar and continuously raise it. And our takeaway is knowledge has to improve and be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it will vanish. And I truly believe that's true. We're a little bit short on time, so this is our graphic showing about the National Council for Interior Design Qualifications. It's 3 tests, as you can see on there. I just would like to encourage all designers that are able to take the NCIDQ examinations. This is not just for students or emerging professionals, but for anyone that wants to advance this noble profession. These examinations set professional designers apart from the pack. And it's not about being prideful or pitting one interior designer against another. We should all strive to be the best that we can be. And this is one of the ways that we can do it. So as you can see, our graphic, once again, you can see that the National Codes and Standards Committee is right in the dead center of it. And that is not by mistake. So we're going to very quickly summarize for you how you can engage in the Codes and Standards process. You can get education, CEUs, further credentialing, participate with the International Code Council chapters, attend the meetings, learn, volunteer. You can, all of the stuff for the International Code Council is online, so you can go on and you can look at it. You can comment as a public comment, as Brian said earlier, and then look at what's happening in your state and their adoption of codes and amendments, and participate in the hearings. How can you engage with the Codes and Standards Committee? We have an email address. It's codes@asid.org. You can invite a Codes and Standards Committee member to speak at your chapter event, and you can reach out to us through that CODES email address. You can join ASID's advocacy training and public forum webinars, such as the one today. You can monitor the website, which is constantly being updated, or you can text ASID at 52886, and you'll get mobile updates. And then we're always looking for members who are passionate about codes and standards and want to advocate for the profession. So we're looking to add new members every year. We just had a call to add new members recently, but we would, it's a 3-year commitment, and the membership is reviewed annually. We're also looking to add students to it, which would be a 1-year commitment. I just want to say, when it comes to students, that the Codes and Standards Committee believes that students are the hope and future of our industry. We believe that outreach to students on multiple levels is imperative. And it's one of our goals to get students and emerging professionals not just interested in codes and standards, but we really want to get them excited about codes and standards. And the final takeaway here is, you can't hit a target you cannot see, and you cannot see a target you do not have. So I love Zig Ziglar, and I think he's amazing. And I think, striving for the target is something that we should all be doing. This is a slide that shows the different resources. I am happy to send this to anybody who requests it, so just feel free to do so. And then, Brian, do we have time for questions and answers?
Yes, Tracy, thank you so much. We absolutely have time for questions and answers. We'll take them until the top of the hour. Please use your question box. Excuse me. Tracy, our first question for you is, how can I make a suggestion to the committee about a change in codes and standards with any of the National Codes and Standards organizations?
Well, like I said, and you can reach out to us, and this last slide is showing our codes at asid.org email address. You can contact me directly, as long as I'm chair, at chair.csc or chair.csc@asid.org. We're always happy to hear input, and we've had people from even different organizations reach out to us to ask us if we would weigh in on certain matters. And we have people that are assigned to different areas within the profession, and we'd be happy to do that. So please do reach out to us.
Thank you, Tracy. The next question is, what is the committee's intent as far as updating professional standards for interior designers?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the reasons that we changed our name from Construction Codes and Standards to the Codes and Standards Committee is because the ethics became under our purview. And so it's something that we've taken very seriously. And so the focus will be to revisit the ASID Code of Ethics. And sorry, I know there's a little bit of feedback there. To revisit our Code of Ethics, and the plan is to rewrite our Code of Ethics. It's something that's needed to be done for a while. So that's something that we're going to be doing, and we'll be sending that out to the membership once it's sent everywhere it needs to go, and it's approved by the national board. Then it will become a standard.
Great. Tracy, can members of USGBC or AIA or members of other organizations become members of the Codes and Standards Committee?
That's something that we've talked about as well. And in fact, we actually had a couple of people that applied to be committee members that were architects, and so they were part of AIA. We're happy to take applications from any of the different organizations because we really believe that we're looking for experts in all of the different areas in which our committee touches. So absolutely, we're open to whomever is interested and passionate about the area that they're wanting to focus on.
And Tracy, I'll just pause for a second. We're getting a lot of questions and comments about whether this will be posted. This will be posted on the Advocate by Design website from the ASID webpage. This will also be sent out to everybody who registered today. So everybody will get a copy of this presentation as well. Tracy, is the committee making recommendations to CIDQ on the NCIDQ exam?
Yes, we are. We have a few members. One of our subcommittees is our education subcommittee. We have a few of our members that are actually on the board of CETA. So that's the organization that goes out and visits schools and reviews schools to make sure that what they're teaching is up to the standards that would be necessary for the NCIDQ. And then we also have members of our committee that are on CIDQ's board, and a few of the members review the questions. I mean, we've got a lot of people that are involved in that as well.
And I'll pause again. Several people have asked how they can get more involved. Tracy, I believe the application for the committee is on the Codes and Standards portion of the Government Affairs website for ASID. Of course, you can reach out to Tracy. The codes email, the chair email is on the slide right now. We're always welcoming new folks. We're always willing to take applications. If there's not room now, we'll save your application, and when there is an opening, we'll be happy to do that. But of course, we're always welcome to people listening into our calls. We're always welcoming people to give us recommendations or to flag certain issues for us. If there's something that you see in your state or on the federal level that you think the Codes and Standards Committee for the Interior Design Profession should weigh in on, please don't hesitate to contact at the information on the stage, on the slide. Tracy, in conjunction with that, is the committee working on climate change?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, we had, and I believe if it's not, it will be on the Government Affairs webpage, but we had an opportunity to respond to a request on a select subcommittee for climate change that was put out by the U.S. House of Representatives, and we actually weighed in on that and gave our recommendations regarding that as well. It's a really hot topic item, as you all know, and so that's something that we had experts on our committee that researched and then weighed in on that.
Great. Tracy, where are the areas that we need or the committee needs most assistance in right now? Where are the areas that we need folks with certain areas of expertise?
Probably NFPA. We're really looking to make sure we strengthen our accessibilities committee, which has to do with universal design, aging in place, ADA. And of course, because, like I just said, climate change is an issue. Sustainability is something that is so important right now, and it's being taught well in our schools. That's one of the subcommittees too that we're looking to make sure that we have enough people on there to be able to address all the issues that are coming down for that.
Okay, one more question, then we'll wrap up for today. If your question's not asked, again, please reach out to Tracy through that email, and we'll try to get in touch with you. Tracy, question, where can folks learn more about codes and standards? Are we offering courses? Are we offering content? Are we trying to connect people with the Code Council or other groups to teach codes content?
That's a really good question. We haven't really been working toward educating people within our committee ourselves, simply because we have such a heavy load with doing what we're doing. And, I just think it's more important that we focus on the efforts that we need to make. But there are lots of educational opportunities through International Code Council, which is open to everyone. Their website is on the resources slide. And there are several other organizations. It's a question that came up recently to us. And so I think that one of the things that we're going to do going forward is to develop a resource that we can give to people that are interested in learning more about codes and standards. I mean, you'll see on the resources slide, I mean, you can go on NFPA's website, you can go on the International Code Council website, and several of the other organizations, and they have some really good information on there. But I think probably we're gonna end up developing a resource so that we can answer that question more easily and more thoroughly.
Well, thank you, Tracy. We're almost at the top of the hour, so that will conclude today's session. Thank you again to Tracy and the Codes and Standards Committee for hosting today's wonderful program. We look forward to hosting all of you on our next joint profession-wide public policy webinar in March. We hope everyone enjoyed today's session and that you'll tell your colleagues and chapter members about these webinars. And always remember, for up-to-the-minute advocacy public policy updates, join our phone to action alert system by texting the term interior design to the number 52886. Again, that's the term interior design to the number 52886. Thank you again to Tracy. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking again soon. Have a great afternoon.